You say no. They ask again. You say no again. They ask a third time in the exact same tone, as if the first two answers never happened. You assume they didn't hear you. They heard you perfectly. Your child is not testing your patience. They are testing something far more important. They are testing whether the world is real. Here is the strange part. A child who asks for candy 17 times in one afternoon is not confused about the rules. In most cases, they understood the word no the very first time. So why keep pushing against something they already know is true? Because consistency, not permission, is what they are actually searching for. Developmental psychologist Mary Ainsworth spent years studying this exact pattern in the 1970s through what became known as the strange situation experiment. She observed toddlers being briefly separated from their caregivers in an unfamiliar room. The children who had the calmest, most confident reactions were not the ones who had never been told no. They were the ones whose caregivers had been predictable. Predictability, not permissiveness, built their sense of safety. A boundary that holds firm every single time becomes something a child can lean on. A boundary that sometimes holds and sometimes crumbles becomes something a child has to keep testing, just to find out which version of you they are dealing with today. Think about what that means for a no that gets repeated. Every time your child pushes against a limit and it gives way, even slightly, their brain logs new information. It says, this wall is not actually a wall. It might move if I push harder, or push longer, or push at the right moment. And because children are constantly building a working model of how their environment behaves, an inconsistent boundary does not calm them down. It does the opposite. It guarantees they will test it again, and again, because uncertainty is far more uncomfortable to a developing brain than a firm answer ever could be. Here is where the neuroscience gets interesting. Neuroscientist Bruce McEwen spent decades researching how the brain responds to unpredictability, introducing the concept of allostatic load, decoded simply as the wear and tear stress places on the body and brain over time. McEwen's research showed that unpredictable environments are more taxing on a developing nervous system than environments with firm, even strict, structure. A child does not need every answer to be yes. They need every answer to be reliable. Predictable limits, even uncomfortable ones, lower stress. Unpredictable limits, even gentle ones, raise it. This explains why a child who is told no and accepts it calmly today might scream over the exact same no tomorrow. It is rarely about the actual request. It is about whether the world responded the same way it did last time. So what is actually happening inside a child's head during a limit test? Picture it as a hypothesis being run, over and over, by a tiny but relentless scientist. The hypothesis is simple. Does this rule still apply right now, in this mood, with this much crying, in front of this audience, at this particular hour of the day? Each test gathers a small piece of data. And because children cannot yet hold abstract reasoning the way adults can, they cannot simply trust that a rule applies universally just because it was explained once. They have to run the experiment enough times to believe the result. This is also where attachment comes back into the picture, in a way that might surprise you. Psychologist John Bowlby, the founder of attachment theory, proposed that children use their caregivers as what he called a secure base, a stable point from which they can explore the world and return to safety. A limit functions the same way. It is not a wall meant to imprison a child. It is closer to a fence around a playground. The fence does not exist to ruin the fun. It exists so the child can run freely without fear of falling off the edge of the world. When a child tests a limit relentlessly, they are often asking a deeper, nonverbal question. Is this fence still here? Will it hold if I lean my whole weight against it? And if the fence moves even an inch, the child does not feel free. They feel unsafe, because now the edge of their world is unclear, and an unclear edge requires constant checking. This is the part most parents never expect. Limit testing usually peaks not when a child feels rebellious, but when a child feels unsettled. A change in routine. A new sibling. A stressful week at school. In these moments, children often push harder against rules, not because they suddenly want less structure, but because they desperately want proof that something in their world is still solid. So when your child asks the same question for the 5th time after already hearing no, what they are often really asking is something closer to, "Are you still you? Are you still steady? Can I still count on this?" There is something almost touching about that, once you see it clearly. The repetition that feels exhausting in the moment is, underneath, a form of trust building. Children do not test limits with people they do not care about. A child rarely repeats a boundary test with a stranger in a grocery store. They save that behavior, almost exclusively, for the people they feel safest with, the ones whose love they are confident enough in to risk frustrating. This reframes the entire experience. A child who tests you over and over is not announcing that your parenting has failed. They are quietly confirming that you are the safest place they know to ask the hardest questions. And here is the part that changes everything moving forward. The goal is not to eliminate limit testing. It cannot be eliminated because it is not a behavior problem. It is a developmental necessity, a built-in mechanism for confirming the structure of an unpredictable world. The goal is simply to answer consistently, so the test ends faster, and the trust builds sooner. Because the question was never really about the candy, or the bedtime, or the extra 5 minutes of screen time. You say no. They ask again. It was never about whether you would change your mind. It was about whether you would stay the same.